Hey everyone, I'm Allison Mars. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. A cybersecurity attack crippling the country's largest fuel pipeline. A Russian crime gang likely involved. So what are they after? Over on Capitol Hill, Kevin McCarthy backing Elise Stefanik to replace Liz Cheney as GOP conference chair. Voters in Cheney's home state of Wyoming turning their backs on her as well.
I think Liz Cheney needs to go. She does not represent the people of Wyoming. 73% of the people here in Wyoming voted for Trump. And she basically stabbed us in the back with she felt it was the right thing to do.
And it's not just the GOP. We are a nation divided. Nearly 2/3 of Americans blaming social media like Facebook and Twitter. What else voters are saying in a new NBC News poll. We start tonight with that cyber attack that hit the Colonial pipeline. NBC News correspondent Ken Delanian is here with me now. A ransomware attack shutting down Colonial pipeline. It's the largest gasoline pipeline in the U.S. It stretches more than 500 miles from Texas all the way up to New Jersey. The attack showing just how vulnerable our cyber infrastructure is. NBC News correspondent Ken Delanian here with me now. So, Ken, what do you know about this attack so far and who's responsible? I mean, the big headline for us, this is pretty massive.
That's right, Allison. So a ransomware attack is when the hackers infiltrate the corporate network and then they encrypt, they lock up the data and demand a payment to unlock it. And sometimes they steal the data and threaten to release it on the web. In this case, we think both things happen. And the FBI is attributing this attack to a Russian criminal group called DarkSide. Let's take a listen to what Ann Neuberger, the top cybersecurity official at the White House, had to say about this to reporters today.
The FBI identified the ransomware as the DarkSide variant, which they've been investigating since October of last year. It's a ransomware as a service variant, where criminal affiliates conduct attacks and then share the proceeds with the ransomware developers.
So this DarkSide group really has perfected extortion as a business model. They're sort of renting the ransomware. They have a helpline. They give discounts to corporations that pay early. They even say that they contribute of the proceeds to charity. But nonetheless, they have crippled a major piece of American infrastructure, Allison.
Ken, it's just unbelievable. So we know Homeland and national security teams are working with Colonial Pipeline. What are their biggest concerns right now?
Well, twofold. As President Biden discussed the fact that these Russian criminal groups are given safe harbor by Vladimir Putin's Russia. They're allowed to sort of perpetrate attacks against the West as long as they don't go after Russian targets. And that's something that only the U.S. government can deal with. But then there's also the question of what is the state of cybersecurity at companies like Colonial Pipeline, and what's the government going to do to step that up? Let's take a listen to Elizabeth Sherwood Randall, the White House Homeland Security Advisor, on that score, Allison.
This weekend's events put the spotlight on the fact that our nation's critical infrastructure is largely owned and operated by private sector companies. When those companies are attacked, they serve as the first line of defense, and we depend on the effectiveness of their defenses. To improve the cybersecurity of our critical infrastructure, the Biden administration has already launched a high-priority initiative to collaborate with our private sector partners to harden our defenses and to build our nation's resilience.
Look, so the Biden administration may be doing this, but one thing that Congress has not done is pass any minimum cybersecurity standards for companies. And that's something that we're going to hear more talk about as we digest the implications of this major attack, Allison.
So, Ken, in practical terms, I mean, the Colonial Pipeline runs from Texas up to Jersey. Do we have any idea when it could be back online? And until it is, how is this disrupting the U.S. fuel supply?
Well, the latest on that is that they're using trucks to deliver some of the fuel, and they say they may have the pipeline back online by the end of the week. But we're already seeing gasoline prices creep up, Allison, and it could get worse. And really, it's a wake-up call that so much of our infrastructure is so vulnerable. And you know, next time it could be something even more impactful. I'm glad this is getting the attention it is, because I've been covering this issue for 10 years, and it's hard to make people pay attention to our cyber vulnerabilities, Allison.
Ken, we are paying attention now. That is for sure. You say gas prices going up, you get everybody's ear, especially heading into the summer. Ken Delaney, and thank you.
I'm going to have a conference. I'm going to be meeting with President Putin, and so far there is no evidence based on from our intelligence people that Russia is involved. Although there is evidence that the actors, ransomware, is in Russia, they have some responsibility to deal with this.
The Colonial pipeline hack on President Biden's agenda when he meets with Russian President Vladimir Putin. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joining me now. Mike, the FBI saying, as we just heard from Ken Delaney, a Russian cybercrime gang is responsible. What is the biggest particular concern here for the White House?
Well, we've heard from a range of White House officials today, and of course we heard from the president as well, as they try to assure the American people that they are on top of this immediate crisis. And so we heard from Liz Sherwood-Randall, the Homeland Security Advisor, as well as Ann Neuberger, the Deputy National Security Advisor, focused on cyber. They've been in touch with Colonial throughout the weekend. The president himself has been briefed multiple times. The Department of Energy is heading up a multi-agency response here. But then there is the larger issue here of what President Obama in the final weeks of his administration talked about as the Wild West, of this emerging battlefield of cyber. And the White House has been very careful about trying to assure the Americans that they're on top of this as well. Remember, in the transition, President-elect Biden said that the former president had taken his eye off the ball on this and left ourselves vulnerable to this. And so they're working with companies to try to give them some guidance about how to handle these. And we heard about some of that guidance from Ann Neuberger, as we mentioned earlier. Take a listen to what she said this afternoon.
We're very concerned about the growth in ransomware and the impact it has, both on small and medium businesses, as well as on state and local governments in the United States and around the world.
Now, Neuberger herself is an example of the ways in which the Biden administration says they've ramped up the federal government's focus on these issues involving cyber. Her position as the Deputy National Security Advisor focused on cyber is a new position for any White House. The president has also announced his nominee to be the National Cyber Director, a new position. And so all of this, as Ken was outlining, is a new frontier in the White House trying to build up the federal government's ability to match this.
Mike, the president also talking today about our economy and a multi-step strategy to get Americans back to work. Tell us about that strategy. What are its steps?
Well, Allison, we talked on Friday about the White House's response to those disappointing job numbers, and I talked about the degree to which it felt like this White House was a bit on the defensive about it. And so today, what the president tried to do is come out with steps that he said his administration is taking to ensure that there are positions available and that everyone is able to get the kind of jobs that are now available. It felt a little bit about what you hear from a candidate during getting a bad poll number, which is this is just a snapshot in time. So some of what Biden announced today is accelerating aid to caregivers, new guidance going out to caregiving facilities about how to reopen so that more Americans can take care of their children so they can actually go back to work. We know that that's one of the White House's big arguments for what they're missing. The administration also announced today $350 billion in American Rescue Plan funding, 2 states, 2 local governments. That will help bring back some of those furloughed workers to the workforce, they said. They're also doing things like clarifying unemployment rules. The president really focused on this specifically in his remarks to push back on that criticism that these generous unemployment benefits are keeping people from wanting to go back to work. He said he wanted to make it clear that if you reject a perfectly good job, then you are no longer able to qualify for those unemployment benefits. And so the president, even as he says that there's no evidence that these generous benefits are keeping people from going back to work, trying to make it clear to people that that shouldn't be a barrier to them seeking employment right now.
Mike, the president has a couple of meetings on infrastructure this week. Today, he's meeting with Democratic Senators Tom Carper, Joe Manchin. What do you know about that conversation?
Well, that meeting is scheduled to happen any minute now, so we'll hopefully get a good readout of that afterwards. It's interesting because we know the other meetings that are on the schedule. We've known them throughout the weekend. On Wednesday, he's meeting with the Big Four. That's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Leader McCarthy on the Republican side, and then Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell on the Republican side there. That's the first meeting of the Big Four in the Oval Office of this presidency. Thursday is the bigger meeting we've been talking about, too, with West Virginia Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capitol. She's bringing 5 of her Republican friends. The meeting today we didn't know was actually happening until just today. And Tom Carper, who's the Democrat senator from Delaware, obviously somebody Biden knows very well, he has a very important job, which is the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, which would have a big say in any infrastructure bill. And then we all know how important Joe Manchin is, the other West Virginia senator who's a key player in this. Yeah. He would potentially be that 50th vote for Democrats if they have to do this only through the reconciliation process without Republican support. And so always important for the White House to make sure he's on board with what they're thinking at the moment.
Yeah, he is a VIP for sure right now. Mike Memoli with the latest from the White House. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Allison.
We need a conference that's united. That's why we need a conference chair that is delivering that message day in and day out and uniting the nation to make sure that we are on the right footing going forward.
Do you support Elise Stefanik for that job?
Yes, I do.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney could be out of a leadership job before the week is out. House Republicans are back on the Hill tomorrow night, and they could vote to remove her as conference chair Wednesday. Let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Hake. Garrett, from everything we've heard, everything you've been telling us from the Hill, it looks like Cheney will likely be out. Elise Stefanik will likely be in. Are you hearing anything different on the Hill to indicate otherwise? What's the latest?
No, this seems like pretty much a done deal. There's a letter floating around from Kevin McCarthy among Republicans saying we're going to have this vote on Wednesday. Remember, this is a kind of a two-part process here. So there will be a vote to remove Cheney from that position. It's a simple majority vote. And then perhaps on Wednesday, perhaps later in the week, we'll see that second vote, that separate vote to install someone else in that role. The odds-on favorite is Elise Stefanik. She's got all the right endorsements, and as best I can tell, there's no one else who's even put their name forward yet.
Garrett, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger comparing his party to the Titanic today. Here he is.
When it comes down to it, that's Liz Cheney's, what she is being removed for is making it uncomfortable and being consistent. And God bless her for having the consistency to tell the truth. The one person continually bringing all this back up is not Liz Cheney, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump was out of power after January 6th. And then Kevin McCarthy went down, probably with Scalise, and put the paddles on him and resurrected him politically back to life.
Garrett, what are you hearing from Cheney's other allies on the Hill? And I know they're pretty few and far between these days.
Yeah, and I think that's important. The way we look at this story is this idea of a Republican civil war, but it is very one-sided at this moment. The vast majority of elected Republicans have made the same calculation. You heard Congressman Kinzinger talk about the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy making here, which is they believe Donald Trump is ultimately going to be essential to their success, at least in retaking the House next year. And so that's the direction that they're going. But Cheney's few remaining allies, including Mitt Romney, have been speaking out about the idea that what's happening to her is the politics of subtraction and not addition. Romney tweeted just a few minutes ago to that point. He said essentially that kicking Liz Cheney out of that job as conference chair will not win Republicans any votes, but it could cost them many. And this is the theory that will be shown, I suppose, in the midterm elections here. Republicans hope that by removing Cheney, I should say House Republicans broadly hope that by removing Cheney, they can stop talking about January 6th. But I think Cheney's not going to stop talking about that just because she's no longer in leadership, and that story is not going away.
Yeah, for sure. Garrett, separately, Capitol Police, the Inspector General, they're testifying this afternoon about his newest report on the January 6th riot. What is he saying today? What have you heard?
Yeah, these issues are all related, right? So this Inspector General has been issuing these flash reports as they go, essentially as he completes elements of his review of what happened on January 6th. Today's is about the idea of the counterintelligence operation that they were running at Capitol Police and that it is essentially lacking and needs to be redone. He's talked a great deal about professionalizing the intelligence operations of the department and essentially changing the way that the Capitol Police Department thinks about itself from a police force force to a protective force. He would like to see Capitol Police operate more like the Secret Service than like your neighborhood community police department. He thinks that could be more effective in stopping potentially events like January 6th and the attacks, the intimidation, the events and incidents we've seen with members of Congress out in their districts, not only around January 6th, but frankly going back to Gabby Gifford's shooting and before that's the direction he sees this department needing to head, Allison.
All right, they're not in town, but it's still such a busy morning, or busy day, I should say, on Capitol Hill. And I know it's only going to get busier when lawmakers come back. Garrett, thanks a lot for getting us up to speed.
Yeah, you bet.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney repping Wyoming since 2017. So what do those voters think about her split with the GOP? NBC News correspondent Cal Perry is in Casper, Wyoming. Cal, Wyoming's a deeply red state. You're in a county President Trump won in November with nearly 72% of the vote. So what are folks there saying about Liz Cheney? Do you have to be pro-Trump to have their vote?
I think so. I mean, listen, the bottom line here, and this is a place that was very popular for Liz Cheney when just less than 6 months ago, right? So it's Trump country, but it's also Cheney country. She's also legacy here. So it's a bit surprising when you hear people say that this was the massive betrayal that they're going to hang on to for some time. Take a listen.
The big betrayal was her voting to impeach President Trump.
She's a traitor.
Why? What did she do?
Well, she's a Republican, and then she votes against the Republican president. She's a traitor. She gets what she deserves, to get run out of office.
She came from Virginia and got elected because her dad had been the vice president. And then she is a step above everybody else. She's the gentle lady from Virginia who represents Wyoming.
You think she'll lose in the next election here in Wyoming?
I hope so. Hope she doesn't make it. Hope she doesn't make the next election.
It's all the more surprising, Allison, when you consider that she actually voted to back Donald Trump more than 90% of the time that he was in office. But things have changed in just 6 months, Allison.
I was going to say, Cal, things change real fast. Cheney herself is saying that the Republican Party is at a turning point, that history is watching. What kind of Cheney support, if any, did you find in this state?
So this is my favorite part of this story, right? You have a very red state. You have an open primary in a year and a half. We've heard Liz Cheney say she's going to run for her seat again. So really, it could be Democrats in that open primary that come to her aid, that actually back her, which is, I'm sure, very painful for the Democrats that live in this state. But if she's the best of two options, it'll probably happen. We heard a little bit about that. Take a listen.
I usually I ride the fence on the parties, but if I feel like she's making good choices and doing things for the right reasons, then I would support her.
And you feel like she is?
Right now she is. She seems to be, yes.
She stands up for what she believes in, and she's not bowing down to the supreme ruler that lives in Mar-a-Lago. I don't agree with Liz on anything else she's done, but I agree with the fact I admire her, and I would vote for her based on the fact that she's said what she said about him. It's true. It's a lie.
Look, that'll be the next major marker here in Wyoming, will be her re-election campaign. I'm not so sure how much the leadership thing will affect that at all, if at all. People here seem to be looking towards that next election, Allison.
Cal, it really is a fascinating story, what's going on there in Wyoming. Thank you so much for your reporting. Let's go to NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce. She's got all the Monday headlines for you from NBCnews.com. Hi, Simone.
Hey, Allison, kicking off this Monday news today with some news about the coronavirus vaccine. So some states across the country are actually scaling back their orders for the vaccine this week. It's because of plummeting demand for the shots. This week alone, states have turned down hundreds of thousands of vaccine doses, but not every state is going along with this trend. Maryland and Colorado are still ordering full amounts. Well, the Department of Homeland Security says it's launching a warning system to find domestic terrorism threats on social media after posts appearing to predict the Capitol attacks on January 6th were either overlooked or ignored by intelligence agencies. The department says it doesn't intend to focus on the identity of the posters, but rather on insights into potential security threats. And Amazon saying it blocked more than 10 billion counterfeit listings on its site last year. The number of blocked listings up 67% from the previous year. The company believes scammers were trying to take advantage of shoppers who were buying more stuff online during the pandemic. And Ford is recalling 661,000 cars in North America. U.S. regulators say retention pins could loosen and allow roof rail covers to detach from the Ford Explorer models that were made between 2016 to 2019. A Ford spokesperson saying the company is not aware of any accidents or injuries related to that recall, though. And Oprah Winfrey and Prince Harry are teaming up to create a docuseries on mental health and emotional well-being. The Apple TV series titled The Me You Can't See will feature celebrities like Lady Gaga and Glenn Close, as well as mental health professionals, and that premieres on May 21st. Dynamic duo there. I mean, you can't get much better than Oprah and Prince Harry, right, Allison? I'll send it back your way.
Yeah, you got my attention with those two names, that's for sure. Thank you, Simone. One nation, two realities. So how is social media fueling that divide? NBC News technology correspondent Jake Ward shows us how easy it can be to follow our way to the extremes.
Jerusha, who didn't want to share her last name, shares a house with her mother. Where is she now? Is she in the house with you now?
Yeah, I think she's downstairs with my son.
But social media is tearing them apart.
The things she sends me, I feel that I can't trust her if she's my mother.
She says a year ago, her mother started consuming right-wing content on social media.
This election was a military-grade sting operation.
And is now sharing videos about QAnon and anti-Semitic theories. Her mother declined to speak with us.
It's not that I think she's my enemy. It's that I'm afraid that she's being used as a weapon against me.
Researchers say this happens every day. So we performed an unscientific test. I took my Facebook account that had no followers or friends. I'm going to follow the top 3 right-leaning pages plus some dog content and see what happens. My colleague Melanie created a new account and did the same, but she went left 7 days.
A lot of people just commending President Biden's job so far.
And what the hell did Joe Biden just say, part 14? On Facebook and YouTube, clicking on whatever their algorithms suggest. Melanie's feed stayed with the issues at first.
Bernie Sanders chairs hearing on the high cost of prescription drugs.
But by day 3, it was a lot of one thing.
It's a lot from Occupy Democrats. That's kind of the dominating force on my page right now.
And mine just went more and more extreme, recommending new influencers. Now they're throwing me at Dan Bongino. Conspiracy theories by day 4. Bigfoot believers. Really? Nonstop anger by day 5. Leftists are becoming the racists. Same with Melanie's.
So the other day, somebody sent me a link to Conservapedia, a Wikipedia made for and by conservatives. And it's pretty bad.
And by the end of the week, a steady diet of fear. The world looks very dangerous on YouTube. Violent robbery caught on camera. Woman fires shots at home intruders. Facebook had no comment. YouTube says that recent changes mean watch time of borderline content from recommendations has dropped by over 70% in the U.S. But researchers say the algorithms are geared to grab us. We click on extreme content, so the system gives us more extreme content.
Over time, that can actually give you the impression that some things that are more obscure or extreme are very much in the normal sphere of conversation.
The most successful influencers are the most extreme.
On Twitter, 73% of posts about politics are created by about 6% of Twitter users, and those 6% of Twitter users have very extreme views.
Jerusha now belongs to an online group for adults who've lost loved ones to politics on social media.
It makes it 10 times worse knowing that this is happening like everywhere in this country right now.
Jake joins me live now. Jake, this is an incredible story on so many levels. Okay, one, I can't believe you ever had a Facebook account with no followers. Two, that Bigfoot content, you definitely got my there as well. But jokes aside, I mean, It is incredible to see how this goes. And how is the pandemic playing into this? Because we are all spending so much more time online and on social media over the past year while we've all, largely been at home and not doing and living as much as we would.
That's absolutely right, Allison. Jerusha, who we spoke to there, says that her mother, really went deep into this beginning in the pandemic. And we spoke to people all over the country, people who had siblings estranged from them, a friend of 25 years, a lifelong friendship totally destroyed when that person also spent the pandemic, through the election cycle, thinking only in the terms that YouTube, Facebook, and other, social media platforms had taught her to think. She began stockpiling food, bought a gun. There's just story after story of people really experiencing totally separate realities in spite of the fact that they're on the same platform. And that really seems to be the story here.
So, Jake, this also brings up this sort of like chicken or egg question, right? Because you have to wonder, were these divisions always here and social media is just stoking them, or is social media kind of creating these divisions and maybe we were more united beforehand? What have you figured out from your reporting?
The experts that we speak to, and, this comes from not just this story, but many years, right, of covering this, as a unit at NBC, they talk to us not just about the algorithms, which is easy to blame, right, to say social media is causing this. But you'll notice that in the science, the word cause is almost never used. Causation is a really tricky thing to pin down. It does seem that social media is amplifying something that is there. But what the experts definitely agree on is that what is there is this basic ancient set of instincts, right, around tribalism, around the emotional, sort of response to all this different stuff. You hit us with that stuff online, especially in social media where the attention economy is everything, right? When you are only really evaluated on how much attention your stuff gets. That is where we cannot resist it. So it may very well be that this stuff was here before now, but to say that social media is not involved is incorrect. We are definitely seeing that we have an unconscious reaction to this stuff. It spreads like wildfire, and it is amplifying this tiny slice of extreme political content so that it feels like it's everywhere and is the norm right now, Allison.
Jake, it's also just so important for us to watch reporting like yours and to realize, so many of us spend, half an hour before you go to bed in the evening, you kind of scroll through your social media, think you're just doing something mindless to pass the time. But I mean, it's having real world impact in a major way. It's really important for us to be aware of.
Allison, I am absolutely convinced of that as well. A recent NBC poll showed that more than 54% of parents right now say that their kids are looking at screens more than they were before the pandemic. How much more? Almost 2 hours more, right? I mean, you talk about how much exposure we are getting at this incredibly politically charged moment. All of this stuff is happening right now, Allison.
All right, summer's on the way. The weather is warming up. It's time for us all to get outside and drop the screens just a little bit. Jake Ward, thank you so much. We always love having you.
Appreciate it.
Social media might be dividing this country, but oddly enough, that is the one thing that most Americans agree on. In a new NBC News national poll, 64% of Americans say that social media is doing more to divide us, while just 27% say it does more to bring us together. NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray joins me now. Mark, it is great to see you. The thing I love about this poll, Americans may disagree on a whole lot politically, but across the board, whether they were Republican, Independent, or Democrat, the majority of folks in this poll agreed that social media splits us up. But that changed a little bit by race. Most white and Latino Americans think social media divides us. Black Americans, not quite as much. What else did you find here?
Yeah, Allison. And of course, when I cover politics, it is always you want to emphasize what people do agree on. As you ended up mentioning, the fact that social media does divide us and tear us apart. Almost every demographic group, majorities, and sometimes overwhelming majorities say that, yes, social media does divide us more than unite us. The one exception were Black Americans, where they were pretty much split, with 42% of Black respondents saying that social media divides us versus 40% who ended up saying that social media brings us together. And some of the other interesting findings, Allison, are that even though people do admit that social media is divisive, when asked a different question on does social media improve your life or make it worse, you end up having almost a majority, 49% who say of social media users who say social media does improve their lives versus just 37 who say that it makes their lives worse. And so I think a lot of it depends on how you ask the question. It's clear that people see social media as a divisive issue, but also that there's the possibility for progress in improving their own lives.
So, Mark, I have to ask, because social media, 66% of American adults said they still use it once a day, even if it is this divisive sort of thing. What's the rationale there? Does this go back to that it improves my life stat that you just shared with us?
Yeah, or just it's so pervasive. I mean, it is hard, Allison, to kind of imagine people who don't have one of a Facebook account or Instagram account or Twitter account. And, those of us who are in the political business, and I'm sure you're in the same boat I am, you almost have to check your Twitter feed constantly just to be able to stay up on the up-to-date political news, even outside of what's going on here at NBC and through our own reporting. And so I think that in a lot of ways, to be able to function in society, you have to be on social media. But as Jake Ward's great package just showed in your conversation that you ended up having with him is that it does amplify our politics. I got my start in politics, Allison, back in the early 2000s, even after the Bush versus Gore recount. But people today talk so much more about politics. And I do think that social media is one of the reasons why you see politics, you see its divisions so much easier than you used to. And that to me is one of the explanations on people using social media a lot, but seeing its divisive nature.
No doubt. I mean, look, you talk about what a necessity it is, right? I'll be sitting here with my phone, scrolling through Twitter to get news, looking at my husband or my family saying, I'm not addicted to social media. I just need to look for work. And there it is, right? It's become such a crucial part of all of our lives.
Same. I have the exact same lifestyle, Allison.
Mark, remember when taking a vacation used to mean just going somewhere? Now it means turning off your phone. It's certainly a sign of the times. Mark Murray, thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
A new wave of Asian American activists speaking out against hate, fueled by the spike in anti-Asian attacks across the country. NBC investigative and consumer correspondent Vicky Nguyen shares their stories.
Hey, Allison, we have seen a growing number of Asian Americans taking to social media and the streets to speak up against hate and division over this past year. For many, it is the first time. So what's behind this shift? Meet some of the emerging leaders in a new movement for change.
We are furious. Stop Asian hate.
Enough is enough. From New York to Los Angeles, Houston to Chicago, rallies to stop Asian hate filling streets across the country. The AAPI community activating after a string of unprovoked attacks targeting Asian Americans.
We have to stand up for our parents, for their grandparents.
And a new generation is leading the way.
Thank you guys so much for all coming out here today and supporting this cause.
Ashlyn So is just 13, but already using her voice, turning her focus from fashion design to stopping Asian hate after seeing attacks on elders in her San Francisco area community.
Because I was inspired by the Black Lives Matter protests, so I told my mom I wanted to do a rally, and she said, okay. That's how I became an accidental activist.
Ashlyn's mom, Angela Wu, was born in Hong Kong and came to America with her family when she was a teen.
When you were her age, had you gone to your mom and said, I want to do a rally, what would she have said?
My mom will probably say at the time, right? Oh, you should focus on your studies. You're a student, you're 13. That's what you should be doing.
What was that like to see so many different generations showing up after your daughter put the call out?
It's just so surprising. We have all broken out of our chains, our baggage of our culture, what our culture said. Be very quiet, put your head down, don't make waves. All of us just thought, you know what, that's over. We have to come out. We have to speak now.
Loud and proud and Asian American.
Alice Soy is an elementary school music teacher and the only Asian American educator at her Brooklyn public school.
When did you start identifying yourself as an activist?
I would say in 2016, more Black and brown men and women were killed as a result of police brutality. And seeing the effect of that on my students when we returned from summer break was truly very heartbreaking.
She started honing her voice, overcoming cultural barriers of her own.
We have been told that we don't matter, that we are silenced, that we are just a model minority myth.
What do you think about the conversations kids and parents in the Asian American community are having around activism that never happened before?
I think, at least for my parents, they're grappling with the idea of me speaking out. They're not big fans of it, to be really honest, but I am so lucky to be here where my parents have sacrificed so much. So as a result, I have to speak out for them.
Her example has been powerful. You can see it during the surprise run-in with a student she taught from pre-K to 5th grade. He's now taller than she is.
How does that make you feel when your students run up and give you a hug like that?
It's amazing. It's honestly everything that I want them to remember, not like the content that I teach, but just like how I make them feel, I hope.
It's those young students she's hoping to inspire.
You are worthy of safety, respect, and love!
By showing them how people of diverse backgrounds can come together and fight racism.
Does that give you hope?
So much hope. It's incredible to see their power of their voice. When I see kids connect with each other about this, I feel truly hopeful about the future.
Asian American activists are also raising money to fight racism.
Activism is also philanthropy. Activism is donating money. Activism is participating.
Sonal Shah is the president of the Asian American Foundation, a new nonprofit that's raised $250 million to support AAPI organizations and causes over the next 5 years.
I believe there's no greater time than now to work together with allies in other communities to create an America that is multicultural and that looks to the future and creates a country that we all want to be a part of and want to live in.
That $250 million raised by the Asian American Foundation will be used to support organizations and leaders focused on stopping hate, developing research, and educating the public on Asian American history. They say this is the largest philanthropic commitment by Asian Americans fully focused on the AAPI community.
A mother and wife of a Marine veteran back with her family in America 3 years after she was deported under Trump's zero-tolerance policy. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas joins us now. Guad, Alejandra Juarez lived in Florida for 20 years before she was separated from her family. Tell us their story.
Allison, that's right. 20 years, half her life in Florida. She's married to a veteran, a Marine veteran that served 3 tours. And this is why her case has gained so much attention after going through an immigration process with ICE where she wasn't considered a priority under zero tolerance policy. She was deported and left to Mexico 3 years ago. Now, there was a congressman that got involved, Congressman Darren Soto from Florida, and an attorney, all helping to get the Biden administration to offer a special permit that allowed her to come back into the U.S. These are her words after she was able to hug her family just before Mother's Day.
This is what healing looks like. This is what this president is doing, healing the country. Thank you, President Biden. God bless you. Thank you.
The special permit is a humanitarian parole that allows her to be in the country temporarily until they can find another solution. Now, the congressman that's involved helping her has actually introduced a bill, the Protect Patriot Spouses Act, that is looking for anyone who's married to a member of the armed services to gain some type of legal residence in the country if they are facing deportation, just like Alejandra was. And, you know, this is just a small example of an immigrant who has a family in America that was separated. And for her, she's living a happy moment, but still some uncertainty because she hasn't found a permanent solution to her problem.
For sure. Guad, the Biden administration's task force just started reuniting families last week. We'll get a progress report on that in June. What will you be watching for then? And how would you say it's going so far? Is it too early to sort of characterize how they're doing?
So, you know, different situations. The families separated at the border, of course, are immigrants that were entering the country. That's a whole different category, right? And they're working to get those families together. Right. Now, this category, we're talking about the spouses of members of the armed services. And sometimes it's difficult to believe that some of them, just like Alejandra, are facing or have faced deportation. The bill that was introduced into Congress would allow them to gain a special visa that would permit them to stay in the country or come back into the country. And I think we have to think of the big picture here. There's other families in other categories in this country, and President Biden has said to Congress they want to discuss a way, because we have an estimated 11 million undocumented individuals living in the United States that have established a life that, just like Alejandra, some of them might have U.S.-born daughters and sons, and we need to find some type of reform to include them in society in America, because they currently live in the shadows. And then, of course, there's some of them that are currently separated, like Alejandra's family was.
What an emotional reunion. Guad, thanks so much for your reporting. It is time for The Bottom Line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. Earnings, inflation, consumer sentiment, all on tap this week. And the markets were off to a pretty solid start. The Dow hit another record high today, topping 34,000 before closing down about 35 points. CNBC correspondent Rahel Solomon here to break it all down for us. Rahel, earnings season wrapping up, but we're still waiting on a few big names. Who's reporting this week?
Hey, Allison. Yeah, so we got Marriott this morning, the hotel chain, reporting a loss as bookings are still hurt by the pandemic. Although the company says they are seeing a pickup in demand as vaccinations improve, driving demand among leisure travelers for ski and beach resort destinations, and another potential sign of good to come. The company says that occupancy in mainland China is near pre-pandemic levels. We also hear from Toyota this week and Disney, so we'll hear how the theme parks business is recovering for them. Allison?
Oh, especially with Disneyland just opening back up. Exactly. We know people are heading to those parks. Rahel, after last week's disappointing April jobs report, a lot of people are wondering, why aren't more people going back to work? Are those extra unemployment benefits giving them less incentive? Are there childcare concerns here? Are businesses even hiring? What are you hearing from companies?
Well, it's complicated. Businesses do seem to be hiring.
Yeah, for sure.
But then we keep hearing business leaders and small business owners say they can't find workers. And then in April, the country added back far fewer workers than economists were expecting. So what is going on? Well, the answer, Allison, really just depends on who you ask. And it may be all of those reasons that you just cited. So critics of the additional unemployment benefit say that the benefit disincentivizes workers. And in some cases, people may be making more on unemployment than at their previous job. But the White House and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen say that the jobs report is proof that the recovery will be a slow one and that people still need support. Yellen, by the way, was asked about the enhanced unemployment benefit and those concerns, and she said that that does not appear to be a factor in why people are not returning to work. And the data, Allison, does largely support that. Other potential reasons include health concerns about returning to work and also childcare issues. And that may be one reason we saw the women's labor force participation drop in April. And a small little asterisk here, we have heard some market watchers say, take this last report with a grain of salt, meaning that next month's jobs report will be even more important. But it's a really complicated issue, and everybody's been weighing in. It's really hard to say for sure if there's one particular reason why the report was a little bit more disappointing than people expected, at least economists.
It is all about inflation this week. We're getting the consumer price index for April on Wednesday, producer price index for April on Thursday. What are you watching for there, and why should our viewers care? Why do those numbers matter?
Well, Allison, compared to all of the other economic indicators, these two are probably the ones that affect viewers most directly. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, essentially a gauge of how much you're paying for goods and services, from milk to big ticket items. PPI, on the meantime, Producer Price Index, is a measure of inflation from the vantage point of producers. It measures the cost of producing or making products. Both of these are important, and both of these are going to be watched very closely, as fears of inflation have really started to worry some investors. The fear being that if inflation gets too hot and sends the cost of some goods too high, the Federal Reserve may raise interest rates, which could make the cost of borrowing more expensive, and then that could have a chilling effect across sectors. Should say, however, the Fed has reiterated their desire to let inflation run further along before raising rates. So not a concern anytime in the near future.
All right, and one last number out this week, consumer sentiment. That's also out on Friday. What will that index tell us?
Yeah, so we get that on Friday, as well as April retail sales data. Consumer sentiment, basically a read on how optimistic consumers are about the economy. The more optimistic they are, the more likely they are to continue to spend on consumer goods. The less optimistic they are, the more concerned they may be about the future, meaning they may begin to spend less and save more. So lots of economic data this week, Allison.
All right, fingers crossed that folks are feeling a little bit more optimistic about the future. Rahel, we always love seeing you on a Monday. Thank you so much.
Likewise, good to be with you.
The New York Stock Exchange relaxing its COVID restrictions today, more than a year after the pandemic forced the historic trading floor to close down for 2 months. So what looked different on the NYSE today? MSNBC anchor Ali Velsh's on Wall Street with all the details.
Allison, I'm here at my old stomping grounds, as you can see, the New York Stock Exchange, where things are getting a little bit back to normal, right? Today was the first day that certain restrictions were lifted that allowed some traders to come back. Now, there have been traders in there. It was actually shut down because of COVID from about March of last year, end of March to sometime in May. It then opened up to limited trading. And now what they're saying is that if you're vaccinated, you can come in. If you're a trader, some media can come in. Guests who ring the opening and closing bell, they've been able to come in for some months, so they'll continue to. But basically, if a particular trading firm has all its members vaccinated, they can increase their head count. So slowly what you'll do is you'll be seeing that we're going from 50% capacity of traders here to something, maybe they'll get back to 100 or at least something higher. That's basically what we're seeing today. So not everybody who could be on the job was on the job today. There's things about it that they have to get through. They have to have, people have to have evidence. They've got to prove that they've been vaccinated. Companies have to submit a form. If the information's not in there, it'll take a few days to get it back to normal. But that's basically what you're seeing, a slight return to normalcy here at the New York Stock Exchange, which reflects a larger return to normalcy on Wall Street and in investment firms and in corporate America. You're seeing these kinds of plans coming through for a lot of firms. A lot of trading floors, as you know, Allison, are not here. They're on the trading floors of financial firms or banks in the area. They're instituting similar rules. So you're seeing a bit of a return to normalcy. As you know, the markets have been very, very buoyant for the last few months. This is further encouragement that 2021 is going to be a whole lot more normal than 2020 was.
Medina Spirit, the Kentucky Derby winner, failing a post-race drug test. The horse's trainer suspended indefinitely from Churchill Downs. So what happens to the horse in the race results now? Here's NBC News correspondent Kathy Park.
Medina Spirit battles on.
On the heels of a record-setting run for the Roses,
Bob Baffert does it again.
Trainer Bob Baffert suspended by Churchill Downs after Medina Spirit, the colt he guided to glory at last week's Kentucky Derby, failed his post-race drug test.
I got the biggest gut punch in racing for something that I didn't do.
In a statement, Churchill Downs saying in part, failure to comply with the rules and medication protocols jeopardizes the safety of the horses and jockeys, the integrity of our sport, and the reputation of the Kentucky Derby. Adding, if the findings are upheld, Medina Spirit's results in the Kentucky Derby will be invalidated, and Mandaloun will be declared the winner.
It's disturbing. It's an injustice to the horse.
Baffert, who denies any wrongdoing, revealing Sunday that Medina Spirit tested positive for 21 picograms of the steroid betamethasone, double the legal racing limit in Kentucky. The substance, an anti-inflammatory, was also found in the system of Gamine, another Baffert-trained horse that finished third in last year's Kentucky Oaks race. Gamine was retroactively disqualified, and Baffert received a fine. The 7-time Derby-winning trainer telling NBC News he didn't treat Medina Spirit with a drug and has requested the horse's split sample be analyzed, along with hair and DNA, to clear him.
That's the part that's really disturbing to us, is that we don't use betamethasone. And my vets don't even carry it anymore.
Baffert has faced troubles before.
This is his 30th time a horse in his care has tested positive for something. He's had 5 within the last year now.
But the renowned trainer insists he's always followed the rules and is searching for answers.
We're giving him everything. We're going to really, really fight hard for this horse.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.